Okay, so I just want to run through what I have here for this interviewer service functionality. This was built around 8 months ago, and it's a little clunky and built in a stateful manner. And we're going to go over the pros and cons of this approach, and then what the new approach we will be doing later is. So, the general functionality of this built on 9/11 of 2024, so what is that, 7-ish months ago, maybe 8. Everything gets passed in through a stateful JSON block. So this would be question, as there's no database connection to the AI service. It's separate. And this is just a very quick way so I could build an API that didn't have to directly integrate with their services since their team was very unresponsive. The general idea, though, of this app is that users provide a list of questions, and then this system goes through and interviews people on those questions and probes for deeper insights to try to uncover what is the core issue that they are facing. So this is more for a marketing research type use case where we want to do, let's say, a interview across 500 respondents on, say, what they like and dislike about their current credit card company or something like that, and do mass amounts of interviews honing in on what they identify as their main issues and such, to then be able to identify the core underlying issues across large amounts of people to then provide a plan to the company on how to best market towards and get their product to market. And this is what a lot of larger consulting firms do, but it takes a very long time. The key value here is that we can scale up this interview process to, let's say, thousands of people at once versus having to have individual trained interviewers actually conduct these interviews. We can just conduct them using AI. So we're going to take a step through the flowchart that we have here currently. So if we take a look, generally what happens is we have a incoming message that's sent to the API. We go through a base validation step. So this is just classical schema validations against a Pydantic object within the Fast API backend. We would then retrieve the current state from the JSON body. And this is where we get into the actual AI features of this app. And what I want to run through here is the pros and cons of having individual checks throughout your AI application. So in this thing, the first one we have is the is message clear. So this is if someone sent you a message that was just gibberish or didn't make sense in the context of the interview, the AI does a check to be like, is this message clear or not? If no, we have logic specifically for handling that very specific case. Otherwise, it then proceeds to the next step. The pros of this approach is that we have a very clear step that we can make an evaluation for. And by this, I mean we can construct a data set where then we can label, is this message clear or not, and then be able to directly control this step. So whenever we make a change to the system, we have a very clear bound of, if a new model comes out, do we swap it out for is message clear, instead of just having to rely on vibes. The downside of this approach, and a lot of these iterative approach and not just letting the model take over, is that this then adds a lot of latency. So each one of these checks is a call to an API somewhere, or if you're self-hosting a model. But either way, it is some external service is needed to perform each of these steps. So then for this case, one of the biggest issues we were running into right now before the V2 was that things are running at a very slow rate. Or not very slow, but we need to get latency down so that people actually want to converse with it so it feels natural rather than having to say, wait 15 seconds for the steps to complete because it has to run this one, the next one, and then all the next ones we're going to get to. That's the general idea of the pros and cons of these multi-step approaches, but let's just walk through the flow real quick. So we have the is message clear. If it is clear, we then proceed to a detail check. So this then is just asking, so is this message provided enough detail to actually answer the question? So if I said, do you like credit cards? And I responded, I don't know. This is obviously clear enough that it's like they did respond in line, but this isn't enough detail for actually getting any useful information out of the user. So then we just would go to a quick handled route that says, no, this is not enough information. We then probe for more detail. And again, we have this very simple yes or no here that we can create an evaluation set for, so we can then do a very tightly controlled, hey, a new model came out, hey, we adjusted the prompt, let's run it through these 100 examples and see what accuracy we have on the yes or no binary classification of the detail check. But then, assuming there is enough detail, we then get into the state management. And we have 4 different states here. The underlying idea behind how we did this is when you are going through and answering a question, you then, for each of these predefined questions, the AI goes and interviews until it has enough details to identify a need, attitude, or behavior for that question. So, for example, in the credit card scenario, if we are talking about I don't like credit cards because I spend too much money, the behavior might be like doesn't have impulse control and overspends, something like that. Then for each of those questions, we would then probe to on each of those NABs or needs, attitudes, and behaviors to then be like, we're going to ask more questions specifically about that need, attitude, or behavior that are dynamically generated by the AI. And then upon generating those NABs, we would, once we have identified a lot of information for each of those, we identify what we call the deeper need, which is the trying to identify the core underlying behavior for this question for this user. This gives us a very tight control over the system. The issue we are facing is 1, there's a lot of steps in there, so that's a lot of latency. And 2, this doesn't really weigh into the value that LLMs provide and being able to ride the exponential curve that a lot of these LLMs can do, where do we really need to have manual checks at these steps, or can we pack it all into one of a top-line model, say Gemini Pro, Claude Opus, even Claude 4 Sonnet, or some of these models that are newer. When this was built 8 months ago, the models definitely couldn't do that, but can they do it now? And how do we then adjust the system to be able to do that? So, like, to get a better idea of why this approach is not going the best, we're going to just really dive in a little bit more. So we come look here and we have, if we are in the state of asking a core question, if it's a simple question, we just set the answer. The standard question is more that generate NABs. So the standard question, we then generate however many NABs we do. And if they do generate successfully, we then go to the next first NAB. We transition to it where it would be something that's like, hey, I don't like credit cards because I spend too much money. It identifies a need of like better financial controls around it, and it'd be like, hey, so do you think that you should benefit from like a system that helps you track how much you're spending on a day-to-day basis or something? And it just probes on that. We then would go back through this process. A message would come in. Is it clear? Is it enough detail? We're on stage probing NAB. Then if we have enough detail, we then generate the deep needs, or there's questions which are like quick follow-up questions for each NAB to try to run this interview through, and asking follow-up questions and the interview complete. Generally here, what we can see is that while this structure works for getting the interview done, it is very not overly complex, but there's a lot of steps in here that we have to control manually. And if we want to make adjustments to the system, we have a lot of evaluation steps that we can do, which means we can very tightly control it. But this doesn't really allow the model to use the intelligence that it has. We're just very tightly saying, here's how you go, model. This is what you get done, and knock it out, which has its pros and cons as we've discussed. Now, what I'm building now today is going to be this V2 flow. The V2 flow is something that rides the exponential of the model a lot better. So over here, the general thing is now we have the overall interview context and purpose. So we're going to keep with this credit card example. It's like the idea of the purpose of this interview is to understand what users like and dislike about their current credit card usage. And we then have a bunch of questions that then there's the base question text along with the research objective of the question. So this is essentially like our overall context of the interview is whatever it is. The secondary portion is each question we have something we are trying to learn about the user within this given question. So the flow then goes with this is AI asks the question, the interview responds. We then try to store out things to memory. So this is like a separate memory structure that I'm going to be setting up that is like a JSON blob that is going to be inspired by the Mem0 architecture for memory, where this will be done in a reducer style fashion where each message it will just be like, do I update memory? And then it just sends some function calls to the memory to update it. And the only thing the AI is now doing is, does the response provide enough context to answer the research objective? So essentially, we're not identifying research like any analysis of these questions. It's just, have we asked enough information to identify a response for the research objective? If no, we then generate a probing question using the memory to inform this. Essentially, this is so that if the user has answered something already or in the past, we don't have to pass the entire interview context. If this is a very long interview, we can then just have the key memory features in there. We then just ask the follow-up question, the interview responds. If there is enough context, we then transition to the next question and generate a transition response and possibly adapt the question. In some cases, this could be very useful in the sense that you want to tailor the next question to the user. This is not really the best for, say, marketing type research in the sense that you want to very tightly control, like, this user answered this question like this. And everything, you're controlling the variables, but say if this was an onboarding flow or a discovery type flow for whatever business you may be running, say, for myself doing AI consulting, I would have you put in your website and then you'd say, I do cleaning services. The next question is trying to identify your SOPs or something like that. And then we'd come back in here and at this like adapt question, we then adapt the follow-up question or the next question to be very specific towards you. So it's less generic and really can hone in on what you are going through so that then we are able to qualify you, or on the discovery call, I then have a lot more information to go into so we can have the most efficient time possible so I'm not having to ask you these questions. So as you can see, this flow, there is, compared to the V1 flow, a few more areas where things can go wrong, in the sense that if the message is clear on not enough detail, we don't have as much tight control over that, if that makes sense. That being said, as the models progress, we don't have to worry about that as much. I think if we're talking about the models now, they probably can handle those checks internally. If we talk the models a year from now, this architecture in V2 is much more scalable to be able just to plug a new model in and you get instant performance benefits compared to here where you need to re-architect and redo things. This is just we have it and we run it and it is now scalable. So hopefully this gives a good idea of, one, how to build an interviewing system, but two, how to really think about architecting systems that are designed more for where the models are going to be in the future. And this is something I have been having to figure out as I go as well, where it's, I built this original system 8 months ago and I was like, this is awesome, it's cool. But as you learn more, it's, do you really need to have tight control over everything, or can you let the model do it? And by the model do it, I really put effort into the prompt, and then the model just acts as the like state machine reducer of everything else, and then you just have to give it a little nudging on the paths you want it to take. So yeah, that is the flow we're going for, and yeah, we're going to be building that today. So the core thing I'm working on building out right now is flowing through these questions. And the general idea that I'm thinking here is every response from this interviewee chatbot should output in a function call, and we're going to have parallel processing of generating the next message along with managing the memory. So first things first, we're going to get things set up to just generate the possible outputs and just scaffolding the structured outputs to be able to do this, in which we are going to use Pydantic along with Microscope to do that. Usually when I do this, I just go over to where I do this a bunch in my more full applications. This is a client project. We go into, let's see, app features, content writing, workflows, sure, hook generation, awesome. And we need take everything and come on over here. We don't need like 98% of this shit. We just need mirror scope. and that I have recently transitioned to Microscope over Instructor just because it has a lighter UI or UX feel compared to Instructor, which requires you to do a little more management of your connectors. I believe they've recently fixed that, but I think 5, 6, 7 is a little very busy. So I don't know how much time Instructor gets compared to some of their other tooling. Over here, I usually do notes on white paper, artist pad, and then end up going back to shits. All right, see what we got. So the general thing I am looking at getting done right now is defining the response models for the user response creation. So this is when the AI will then respond back. When done, there's a few cases here that we need to handle. We are first looking at the case of, do we need to generate a probing question? Let's just start mocking up some pydantic models. So we got these models for objective answered, objective, not object. When making things, I really do to give really good documentation. This is both for myself and anyone else that comes in, and especially now to AIs coming in to work on your code. It is very valuable to be able to have it clearly understand what's going on. So that's why I'm explaining what each of these are on the enum level, so that when I come in here later and just say, hey, AI, we need to update this or whatever, there's context around that. We come in here, and the last one is cursor tabs, pain sometimes. Jesus Christ. Just want to import that. There's a way to override that, but sadly, I don't think there is. So essentially here, this model is just an enum saying, if we take the route of we are going to move forward to the next question, we want to be able to really track why it's happening. So if it's like we've satisfied the research objective, awesome. If it's a null answer, you want to continue on and not keep probing. With the credit card example, we don't want to say, hey, do you use credit cards? And they're like, no, I don't use credit cards. It's like, what do you not like about credit cards? I don't use them. It's like we want to continue on to make this interview as painless as possible for the user. And that's one of the core things we're going to be focusing on. And then that's the null answer, and there's the user safety skip. We don't want to just be forcing the AI to keep grilling a user if they're like, how much do you make? And they say, I don't feel comfortable talking about that. And so, no, you need to respond. It's like, it doesn't feel very like collaborative. It feels like it's very much attacking, and we don't want that. Okay. And then just gonna do route. Moving to the next question. Okay, so now we're going to move to the transition to the next question model. And here, essentially, this is the step where we are going to fix in the next question along with history. I have sentence transitions. Okay, now we have that. And now we need the route. You now have the route for if the research objective is not satisfied. I think this is where it would be best to handle generate the probing question, but then also we'll figure this out. But essentially now, there's another markdown here. This is LM. Oh. So then here we need another if. Adjust this to be the reason for follow-up enum that it either is research objective not satisfied or message unclear, where the research objective not satisfied just means we need to get more context from the user. And the secondary thing is if the message was not clear, such as if the inputted text was like, the question was like, what do you, what's your favorite thing about the beach? And I like orange surfboards. And it gets interpreted as I like oranges. And it just doesn't fit with the context. It's a follow-up question that just is clarifying what the user has said. Please import the proper typing to allow this to either be a follow-up question response or a proceed to next question response. Please make it though so it can only be one or the other, not both. Okay, so let's go into prompts. All right. Whoever my one concurrent viewer is, I love you. And we lost him. Sad times. Okay, so you're a friendly and validated interviewer. Sure. Okay. Adjust these instructions to update the instructions here to say that it's a chat interaction output, which is either a response detailing to move to the next question and the reason why, or a response to probe the next question and to along with the reason why and the probing question for this. Essentially here we need to explain the different reasons why each route would be taken and such. Let's see. Looks like I might have frozen. Love when EOS webcam utility goes down. Why would I want to close it? Why is the camera doing this, man? And we're back, but now we're blurry. Yay. Go back to Streamlabs up, and we are back. Sorry about that. My camera likes to be fucked up. All right. So here we're adding in what we're doing and why we care about it. Okay, and with this, okay, what is that, a cat? Okay, we haven't froze again already. Okay, where's that message or roll enum? Don't really think we're going to. I think it's just those. We're just going to condense this down for testing. Okay, so we got an overall purpose. Doesn't really have to be much, we just need it, right? Okay, so here we have this formatter for just XML prompt, and we will just get those in here. All right, and then we need, what is the response model we care about? We don't want to validate and transition because we need to look at the question. Next, it's going to need to be a next step. I could try packing it into this, but I just could get funky with having the next question there. We want to make sure it asks it verbatim, so we will just make that a secondary step. It's like Flash. Now, the whole point of me coming up here was this follow-up chat interaction response. So this then it should, if I just... So we test the flow. Let's get the overall context. Memory is equal to nothing. Okay, so we have that. What is the... Oh, it's Flash preview. It's fine. 0520. Okay. So now I have the chat flow mocked up. I think that looks pretty good. Generating the transition is another, that's a quick one. That could probably be done with 2 Flash or anything really. That's a really cheap change. Big one is memory management. So I'm going to honestly just copy this, bring the memory back over. Because pretty much everything is the same. Except we need to run a memory update job with tool calling for this. We're going to copy it, then we're going to call this memory management. Okay. Please update this prompt to be about a memory manager. And it is designed to keep track of and update memories about someone through various chats so that we don't need to pass massive context. These memories should be very quick and succinct things. The actions it can take are to create a new memory, update a memory or remove memory. Creating a memory is if there's something new that we need to know about the user that we haven't talked about already. Updating it is if they change something. And removing it is like if they say, I like pizza, but then like later in the thing they're like, I no longer like pizza. We want to remove the memory, or honestly may want to update the memory as they don't like pizza. But these are the options we can take. Okay, now we're doing available memory actions. Don't need a lot of these. I'm going to update what I'm doing once I have the code written. Update the name and DOP string to be a memory action response. Okay, so then that should be there. Okay. I'm going to now see if it does multiple memories. Is a good worker, drive as Uber, likes animals, personal interest, awesome. This is looking pretty good. Okay, so let's now walk through the flow that we have here for memories. So essentially each message that comes in, we're going to have a parallel operations here. So essentially we are going to run these two completions at the same time in parallel for hyperspeed. Okay. So essentially, each interview question that comes in from or each user response, we are going to run at the same time this completion to determine if we need to go to the next question or not, and this memory management tool. These then will at the same time generate what next step we're taking, and then at the same time also update the memory of this and then return that back. So then we can have double the compute at once. And then I think we probably could have a response time of around like averaging 2 to 3 seconds, which would be pretty crazy fast and hitting lots of nice value. So I think I'm going to pause the stream here, take a little break, come back in a little bit, and in that portion I'm going to now wire this up into a app for the client to test out. We are back. We have some good notebooks on how we have it set up, and the goal now is to just transition this logic from the notebooks that I tested out into this Streamlit app with all the required functionality so that I can set it up and then deploy it and test it for the user. Core thing now is I don't want to do that. So we're going to go into here and we're going to say we want all the Streamlit files. We want all of this, and core, we don't want that. We don't want the commit. We don't want any of this gross shit that we've done in the past. And we do want the API. And now need to do a little speech to text, so you'll get to hear as long as I am going. I'm transitioning to a version 2 of my interviewer app here. I don't want to update the existing app. I want to build a demo application within Streamlit to test this out. Generally, what this app needs to do is it needs to be able for me to upload an example interview doc. So this would be a schema that has the interview objective along with the questions with the research objectives. And then I need to take the logic from my notebooks and implement it into this. And I've attached some files from the DeepNeed AI just so that we understand what the endpoints and schemas along with the models I'm currently using to try to make it in line with some of this, maintain some of the structure, but all the logic that gets changed is within the Streamlit app. All of the things inside of Streamlit currently can be wiped as this Streamlit has been deprecated. Okay, and now I'm just going to walk through the flow. The flow of this app should be as follows. Essentially, we are just going to ask the user question. It's going to be a chat interface within Streamlit, and we're just going to keep asking questions. And on each message in parallel, we need to use a sync.io or threading or whatever, but most likely async IO to do two async functions. One will be the LLM call to generate the next objective or the next question, and the other one will be to create the memory objects. So we will need to move the memory logic into Streamlit along with the LLM logic and set this up. And it's very simple. It's just iterating through the questions and just sending the message to a user. And we need to be logging out these messages into an internal state. And then when the interview is done, we should be able to download the full response. Okay, so now we have this big plan and repo prompt. Whatever it is, doesn't really matter. We're going to go in and we're going to hit plan with O3 because I don't like money, but O3 is amazing at this. So hit that, and we will now take a second as that goes. Got my Discord open, but we don't want that. And that was a Claude getting this all set up. Kind of looks like we got a big old plan. Okay. We're just going to do that. Okay, we're going to come over here and we're going to do Claude. Yep, we're good. Okay, yep, we're just getting those two things read so it understands what we're doing. Doesn't need to do any changes. Cool, cool. Now I'm just going to paste this big old plan in here. And yeah, we'll just let it fucking go. Bam, pasting text. 256 lines, awesome. Yeah, let's just make it so that it doesn't have to ask for make directory commands. We're just going to let that run. Yeah, let's just, it wants to make an edit to that init file. Where is that going? Streamlit v2. Awesome, like we got core and UI. Yes, let's just let it keep going. I'm also going to just go in here and get add dot commish dash m save point before Claude go crazy. I'm going to push that up because I don't want Claude to go crazy. Yeah, let's let it do that. Claude's just going. It's building it out. I'm going to pause it and come back once Claude Code is done writing this out so we can then do a little testing. Okay, we're back here with Mr. Claude, and I have been messing around here, so it works pretty good. We got memories here. It did all of this without me asking for stuff with the memory bank and such. We are now going to check in on one thing that isn't that big of an issue, but I'd want it fixed. First things first, all this LLM stuff is in one big file. I want to change that, so I'm going to ask that too. In the core LLM file, can we make this an LLM folder and then have each with the response model prompts and such be within its own file, just so that it's easier to understand what each LLM interaction is for? So we're just going to let that run. Okay, looks like that generated. Let's get that going. Okay, everything looks like it's implementing. Utils, yep, I'm going to come back once it's done implementing all this stuff. Okay, I'm back with a couple little updates I've done. One, I clicked the model down to Gemini 2.0 Flash just to get it moving really fast, so we can, the responses are a little crappier now, but now the client can make a decision around, does he want speed or quality? Because the big issue was speed before, but now we're getting sub 2 second response time, but quality has dropped, so we can iterate on the prompt and then move to a longer model if we want to. And I added this use sample interview button so that instead of having to load the JSON file, you can just click use that. What do you do for work? I'm just going to go through and say I do gig work. How many hours you work each week? Around 20 hours driving Uber. Cool. And why do you need to know that? Okay, that's acting weird. Alright, let's just remove some of these prints. And where is that? Is it in chat state? Chat logic, yeah. It's a little clunky of a setup, but it is fine. Alright. Okay, so there we go with that. We're just going to rerun it and be like, I take Advil. I don't know. And no. Why is that breaking? Gotta love debugging. I do gig work. Base call, like, God, Microscope, what do you do? What is the docs? Like, here's where we go, in their Microscope, reach. Oh, I see, I have to do at retry. Oh my God, we need tenacity. It's not built in. Ew. Okay, that's fine. It wasn't really that big of a deal. Alright, my 2.0 flash. And let's make sure we have that here as well. Let's make sure everything runs. What happened? Just make sure I take Advil. Never. What is going on with that? Alright, we got a little bug. I gotta figure this one out, but I hope you guys get the idea. You can run through this very quickly, and now we have a good system in place. Might need to slow it down a little bit, though, to ensure that it is working properly. And yeah, I will talk to everyone later.